Hare Krishna. So let us begin the session by the pranama mantras. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, welcome everybody. So today we'll be discussing the chapter 4, which is also called as transcendental knowledge. So in this chapter, totally there are about 42 verses, and these 42 verses can be divided into 5 sections. So the first section is coming from verses 1 to 10, and this can be named as Krishna re-establishing the chain of disciplic successions. So from verse 1 to 10 we can see this, and as you can see, the first verse, it is beginning with Krishna's statement that I instructed this imperishable science. This imperishable science referring to Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is explaining the history of Bhagavad Gita. He said that I instructed the science of yoga to sun god. So sun god's name is Vivaswan. So and then the sun god instructed it to Manu, the father of the mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So what is the connection between Bhagavad Gita and sun god? So now one can question, why did Krishna specifically choose sun god to instruct this knowledge? So why there was nobody else, is it? So why was sun god selected or chosen? So the Shastras explain that the sun is the king of all the planets, and sun god is the predominating deity of the sun planet, and the sun planet sustains all other planets including earth by supplying the heat and light, and the sun is rotating in his orbit under the order of Lord Vishnu. So the Vedas confirm that sun is rising up every day and setting because of the fear of Lord Vishnu. So in other words, sun is the most crucial aspect of the sustenance of all the material creation and all the other planets. So therefore Krishna wanted the sun god, who is the predominating deity of such an important planet, to receive this first knowledge, and therefore he made Vivaswan as his first disciple to understand Bhagavad Gita. And later, as Krishna himself is explaining here, Vivaswan explained it to Manu. Manu is the father of mankind, and Manu passed it on to Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku was the first king of the earth planet in the current millennium. In the present millennium that we are living, the first king of the earth planet was Ikshvaku. So in this way, the science of Gita was passed down from one guru to another in disciplic succession. And in the next verse, Krishna says that this is how it was being passed down, but then it was broken at one point in time. Now, what does Krishna mean by saying the disciplic succession was broken? It means that there was a gap in the conclusion, or the conclusion, the message that was intended by Krishna to Vivaswan, to Manu, to Ikshvaku was not passed down the way it got perverted. So that is how you see in the present world also, everybody wants to basis his theory and interpretation on the basis of Gita. So they will not say that this is my version, because if you say this is my version, who cares for your version? So whereas if you say your concocted theory basis the Gita's verse, then there will be some value to what knowledge that you are speaking. So therefore everybody uses Gita as his means of explaining his own concocted speculated theory. So therefore this had happened at that time also, and therefore Krishna is telling that it was broken. And Srila Prabhupada gives a beautiful example to explain that how uh, the science of knowledge, if it is unbroken, it is like a postmaster. So postmaster, his duty is only to collect the post from the person who is transmitting the message, and deliver it to another person. So he will not meddle with the contents of the message. So the postmaster's duty is to pick the post and deliver it to the address mentioned on the post. So similarly, the role of a bona fide spiritual master is also called as transparent via medium. So the transparent via medium phrase is used by the Shastras because he will not go into the content, he will not meddle with the contents. He will receive the knowledge from his guru, and then he becomes the guru for passing on the knowledge as it is, just like the postmaster passes on the message. So, but unfortunately, as Krishna is explaining the second verse, it was broken, means the knowledge was not passed down as it was. So, therefore, Krishna is now instructing that same knowledge to Arjuna. So, now Krishna is clarifying that. Is it different from what he had instructed earlier to Vivaswan, sun god? No. He's telling that I am instructing that self same knowledge. And now, here in this verse, he is explaining why is he choosing Arjuna. Just like there is a reason why he chose sun god, as we discussed now in the first verse. So similarly, he is now choosing Arjuna because Krishna says, I am choosing you because you are my bhaktosime sakacheti, you are my devotee and you are my friend. In other words, Krishna is indirectly telling what are the qualifications to understand Bhagavad Gita. The qualifications to understand Bhagavad Gita is one has to be a devotee. That means we have to surrender. The mood should be of devotion, not to find fault or challenges. And then one should be a friend. Friend means one who does not envy. So he does not consider Krishna as the competitor. So now, when somebody says you should surrender and you should be a friend, now is it recommending that one should not question anything? One should not have any inquiries? Whatever Krishna tells, you should say yes to it? So, no, Krishna explains this answer to this in more detail in the 34th verse of the same chapter. When we come there, we will discuss that. In fact, the next verse itself is an inquiry or a question by Arjuna. So, in other words, the answer is queries are not discouraged, but it has to be done in the mood of a devotee, with the mood of understanding. It is not done in the mood of challenging, to question the very existence of that. If that mood, then we will not be doing in the mood of learning. So that is what Krishna is indicating in the third verse. So in the next verse, Krishna is Arjuna is asking this question, when because Krishna is telling, I have already instructed this knowledge of Gita several years ago to sun god, who further gave it to the Manu, and then Manu gave it to Ikshvaku. So, but how can I understand this? Because if any of us say that I have instructed this knowledge to the great grandfather many years ago, so then obviously you will say that, "Yare, you are younger to me, but how can you instruct the same thing?" Arjuna is asking. Sun god is more senior to you by birth, but then you are saying that I have instructed this science to sun god. How do we understand this? So this is the question that was put forth by Arjuna. So then Krishna explains in the subsequent verses that yes, he might be more senior to me by birth, but I can remember all of my previous births and you cannot remember. So this is because a living entity changes his body. Just like in the second chapter, 13 sloka, Krishna had given this example. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavanam jara. How the soul, once it accepts the body of a child, so then moves on to the youth, then middle age, then old age, and finally death. So the body keeps changing. So these bodies that we change, but it is not the same thing with the Lord's body. The Lord's body is called Satchidananda Vigraha, the personality of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means eternity. There is no cessation. There is no death. And Chit means full of knowledge. There is no scope for darkness or ignorance. And Ananda, so it is full of bliss. There is no scope for illusion or distress, so or misery. So this kind of a difference in the body is what Krishna is giving a reason that why he has been existing, although he has changed the bodies many times, but he can remember all that, but Arjuna cannot remember. So, and the Shastras give example that Lord's body is like the Vaidurya stone. So, the Vaidurya stone is the same stone, but it changes its color with respect to different times and when different lights are projected on it. It is the same stone. So similarly, Shastra is saying that Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayavvanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So the Shastra is telling that Krishna has been taking multiple forms, but they're all Advaita. They're all one. There are no duality. There is no Dvaita. And Achyuta. So they don't fall down like our bodies fall down after a certain age. And they're Anadim, the oldest. At the same time, they are Navayavvanamcha. So they are the youngest. So they are the Adyam. They are the beginning of everything. And these different bodies of Krishna cannot be understood by Veda study. Vedeshu durlabam adurlabam atma bhakto. But then who can understand? But by pure unalloyed devotees only. So that is what Krishna is giving an answer to Arjuna. Had instructed this science of Gita to son many millenniums ago. And then it is also interesting to know in this verse that Krishna addressing Arjuna as Parantapa. So Parantapa means a hero, a mighty hero who can subdue all his enemies. So Krishna is indeed sarcastically mentioning to Arjuna as Parantapa because it is meaning that although a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never become equal to the Supreme Lord. So here Arjuna is Parantapa, a mighty hero who can subdue enemies, but he can't remain his previous life also. So this is the indirect thing that Krishna is indicating to us. And then in the sixth verse, next verse, Krishna is explaining that how we are all, the living entities are forced to take our material bodies because of our karma, because of our past karma. But when Krishna descends, he does not take body on account of his own karma, but it is out of his sweet will. And when he descends in the self same transcendental body, which we discussed just now, Satchidananda Vigraha. So therefore, we call birth and death for all our living, normal living entities. But when Krishna appears, it's called appearance and disappearance. He is called incarnation. In Sanskrit, is called avatara. So therefore, Shastras also tell the unborn takes birth. So that is the day of Janmashtami. So Krishna is not taking birth because of his karma, like all the other living entities. So he is doing this for certain purpose, which he explains in the following verses. And he takes his avatara incarnation in the self same transcendental body. And the proof is, even when he was a small child, so he killed Putana when he was a 6 months baby. When he was hardly 1 year old, he killed Trunavarta. When he was 7 years, so 8 years old, he lifted the Govardhan hill. So it is proving that Lord is God at all times. It is not that as he grows, he acquires power. So therefore, his appearance is called as Avatara. And Shastras explain it is like the rising and setting of the sun. We don't call, when there is sunset, we don't call the sun has died. Or when there is sunrise in the morning, we don't say sun has born. The sun is always existing on the horizon. So, but it is only rising and setting from our vision. So, similarly, the Lord's appearance and disappearance, it is continuously happening either in this planet or in the other planet. So, therefore, it cannot be called as birth and death, but it is the appearance and disappearance. And in the next two verses, Krishna is explaining why does he descend. So he says in the seventh verse that whenever there is decline in the religious practices, so yada yada hi dharmasya glanihi. So whenever there is glanihi, decline in the religious principles, and abhyuthanam adharmasya, when there is predominant rise in irreligion, at that time I descend myself millennium after millennium. In every millennium I descend. And then in the following verse he says that what is my purpose of such descent? There are three purposes. One is paritranaya sadhunam, that is to protect the devotees, vinashaya chatushkritam, to annihilate or kill the miscreants, and dharma samsthapanartaya, to establish the principles of dharma. So just like the Buddha Avatara, if you see, there was a predominant rise in the misuse of the scriptural references. So there was a point where people were rampant in animal killing by quoting the verses in the religious scriptures that how one can sacrifice an animal on a particular day and with certain rituals and with certain conditions. But they set aside all those rituals, conditions, prerequisites, but they went on rampant killing. So this is called Ardha Kukuti Nyaya, which we had discussed in the previous sessions also. We will take half knowledge, whatever is favorable to us, and do not consider the other half which is not favorable to us. So this is how it had happened, and therefore Lord appeared as Buddha, and he said, disregard all these scriptures. Ahimso paramo dharmaha. So the practice of non-violence is the greatest form of religion. So and then similarly Narsimha Avatara. I think recently also, I think some of you might have heard that there was a new movie released, Mahavatar Narsimha. So if you have not watched it, please do watch. It is a very nicely brought to life basis the Shastric version. He has nicely used animation and the tools to bring it to the modern contemporary audience. So Narsimha's avatara was meant to destroy Hiranyakashipu, who was creating a havoc in the following of religious principles. He was becoming a nightmare to all the sadhus who were executing their prescribed duties of yajna. So the Lord came similarly when Hiranyaksha dislocated the entire Earth planet and threw it into the Garbhodaka waters. So Mother Earth was completely in anxiety. So that was the time Hiranyaksha took the form of a boar. So because only boar can go into the filthier region. So the Lord is a transcendental boar. So like that, every time when there is a decline in the religious principles and predominant rise in irreligion, so the Lord appears for these three purposes as mentioned in these verses. And then he also says in the next two verses, 9th and 10th verses, that how important is it to understand the speciality of his birth and happy activities. It is not that, okay, simply it is like a storytelling, or it is like some movie we hear of some heroic activities of a particular character. So there are so many imaginary characters in the modern days, like Pokemon or so many other Superman and all that. So, but what is the importance or speciality of understanding Krishna's birth and activities? He explained in the 9th and 10th verse. So Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo vetti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma. So whoever understands my janma karma chame divyam, as transcendental, not belonging to like other material beings taking birth. So one who understands this, Janma karma chamed evam yo vettita, who understands this in truth, tyaktva deham punarjanma. So when he leaves this body, he will not take punarjanma again. So that's the advantage of understanding Krishna's birth and activities. And in the next verse, he also says that there are many people who have attained me by such understanding. So he's also giving a proof. It is not simply theory, but it is out of practicality. And then in the 10th verse, Krishna is telling the disqualifications for those who want to go to Krishna's planet. So here he is telling about the qualification that if you understand my birth and appearance, you can come to Krishna. In the next verse, he is talking about one who wants to go to Krishna's planet, he has to be free from attachment, fear, and anger. These are the three things: Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. So these are the three things that one has to become free from. So, and only when we become free from these three things, we can ourselves fully absorb in Krishna, and that is the meaning of taking shelter of Krishna. And when we take shelter of Krishna, who is the supreme pure, so Arjuna is praying later in the 10th chapter, we will see he is Param Brahma, Parandhama, Pavitram Paramam. He is the supreme most pure being. So when we take shelter of such a pure being, we also get purified, and when we get purified, we can attain love for Krishna. So therefore, a self-realized person, in other words, never takes shelter of anybody other than Krishna. So it is one of the 6 qualifications of surrendered soul. He never considers anybody else as the source of shelter other than Krishna. So one who wants to go to Krishna's planet has to be free from all these three things, Vita Raga Bhaya. So free from attachment to anything, be it our material things, possessions, relations, or anything. So and then fear. So we don't have to be fearful of anything because Krishna is the protector. So just like recently, I was hearing this story that when there was a newly married couple, they went on sail on a boat, and when they were almost in the middle of the ocean, so there was a heavy turmoil, and the boat was kind of almost about to capsize. So everybody were completely panicked, and they were all completely in anxiety about their life. But the husband of this newly married couple, he was very cool and calm. So and then later, when everything got subsided and people had a sigh of relief that their life was saved, so the wife asked husband, "Are you not fearful of losing the life? So why did you not panic? I couldn't see any anxiety on your face." So husband said, "See, there is nothing that we can do while we are in the boat by getting panicked, and rather I was not panicked because." So after saying this, he pulled out a small razor from his pocket and he pointed that razor at the neck of the wife. So and the wife started smiling. So then husband asked the same question to the wife, that you see that razor is so sharp, and if I just apply some more pressure, your neck will get slit, your throat will get slit, but still you are smiling. Why is that so? So she says that yes, the razor may be sharp, so but the person who is holding the razor is my loving husband, and therefore I have no fear. So the husband says similarly, there could be adversities in life, there could be difficulties in life, but when the person behind those arrangements or the supreme is the supreme lord, the supreme father, then why should one worry about it? So that is the moral of how we can be free from fear. So, and then in the next section, that is the verses 11 to 15, Krishna is talking about liberation. So, and he's talking about how by working in divine consciousness, in transcendental knowledge, one can be liberated. So, and Krishna is giving one important principle here, that ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sathaiva bhajamyam. As you surrender, so shall I reciprocate. Means whatever way you surrender or you approach me or you want me to reciprocate, I will appear in front of you, I will reward you accordingly. So, in other words, Krishna is telling, irrespective of whatever we are pursuing, this way or that way, everything is His manifestation. So, therefore, the Shastra says something is as Yoga Maya, something as Mahamaya. Somebody is after yogic parts, somebody is after the results of their prescribed duty. So, whatever it is, that's why finally Shastra says, Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. It says that whether we are having no desire or having all kinds of desire, but let us worship Krishna because he is the master of all the thing that we are supposed to get and all that we are pursuing. So and then further he says in the 12th verse that whatever you are pursuing or whomever, whether you are wanting yogic power, whether you want transcendental knowledge, whether you want sense gratification, whether you want elevation to higher planets, whether you want Krishna Bhakti, whatever you want, finally it has to be given by me. But when you go to the demigods, that is other devata, yajante iha devataha, all other administrative gods, you may get some results quickly. So, but those gifts that you are getting are temporary and they vanish like the bubbles on the water. So, in other words, Krishna is telling here the futility of the results that we get by pleasing the other devatas. So, it is also said that just like Krishna is like the, or Vishnu is like the managing director of a company. So, you might have many levels of people or managers between your position and the managing director. So your immediate boss may be signing the recommending a pay for you, but finally it is given by the managing director. So similarly, we may approach so many devatas, but Krishna is telling finally it has to be given from me. But then when you get these temporary gifts from other devatas, they vanish like bubbles on water. So therefore, an intelligent person will not hanker for this. And then he goes on to say in the verses 13 to 15 that how he has divided the four divisions of human society. So, and he says, Chatur Varanyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. So, we should understand here that Krishna is not telling that I have divided this society based on Janma. So, it just sometimes we all have the conception that okay, we are Brahmanas, we are Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. So, and we naturally consider a person born in the Brahmanas family is a Brahmana, a person born in a Shudra family is a Shudra. So, but Krishna is telling that I did not create these four classes of the society based on Janma, based on birth, but rather I have created this based on Guna and Karma. That is based on the quality. So, what quality we have and what work we are doing. And Srila Prabhupada gives an example that how an high court judge. So, when there is a child born into a high court judge, the father, the son is not automatically an high court judge just because he was born in the house of a judge. So, he has to grow up, do the appropriate studies, pass the relevant examinations, and qualify himself. Although there could be a favorable situation in terms of the father guiding him as to what studies to pursue, how to crack this exam. So, but then he has to tread that path, and only then he can become a high court judge. So, similarly, Krishna is telling that here he has created these four society classes of society based on guna and karma, and Krishna is also telling, but you should also know that I am not bound by work. And one who understands this, that I am not bound by work, no karma for Krishna. In other words, karma is all only for the living entities. So then this understanding itself is called liberation. So that is what is explained in the next verses also, 14 and 15. And then Krishna is also telling that to retire from the activities of Krishna consciousness, to just like Arjuna wanted to retire from fighting and to go to a forest and to retire himself completely from the duties. So it is not the correct thing. So Krishna is telling that it is not at all recommended to retire like that, rather engaging in the field of activities for the sake of Krishna. And he's telling, just like the examples of sun god and Manu and Ikshvaku in the 15th verse. So similarly, just like the ancients, you should also perform your duty. In other words, Krishna is disapproving Arjuna's doubt. Krishna is dissipating Arjuna's doubt whether to be active or to retire from work. So that is being answered here. And Krishna is telling you should follow the path of the ancients and you should work in such divine consciousness. And then in the next section, the section 3, verses 16 to 24, Krishna is explaining the symptoms of a person who is in full knowledge. So, the transcendental knowledge, a person who has attained the knowledge, how does he behave? So, this was one of the questions that Arjuna had asked in the second chapter, last section, and Krishna had explained the symptoms of Sthita Pragna. So, the continuing from that section, Krishna is here explaining the symptoms of a person who is in transcendental knowledge. So, Krishna is telling that such a person will know what is action and what is inaction. And he says it is this kind of an understanding is very difficult. That's what Krishna is telling. It is bewildering even to the intelligent also. So, but what is the reward for those who somehow succeed in understanding this difference between action and inaction? They will be liberated from the sin. So that is the greatest reward. So, but it is not easy because even the intelligent will be bewildering. So this is where Krishna is trying to explain in these 5 verses from 16 to 20 the third kind of activity apart from the two kinds of activity that generally all people know. So the two kinds of activity that we all know is punya karma and papa karma. So that is pious work and sinful work. But Krishna is now introducing another category of work called as akarma, also called as Krishna karma, and the meaning is devotional work. So in other words, both pious and impious, they generate reaction, and they are the cause of our bondage and repeated birth and death. So that is what Krishna is telling in these verses 16 to 18 about these three kinds of thing. And then he is also talking about how knowledge is power. We also see this phrase inscribed in many of the colleges and universities. So the same thing is telling that he will this transcendental knowledge. Krishna is further, he will be devoid of gratification. Sense gratification means trying to please one's own senses. So, not working for the pleasure of Krishna, but for one's own sense enjoyment. And then Krishna also gives next symptom, abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities. This is what we read in the previous chapter, also third chapter. So that is the one of the famous verse, Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan. So, and then the another symptom Krishna is listing here is ever satisfied and independent. So, in conclusion, Krishna is telling that one who does the devotional work, he can be freed from all the reaction. So that is how he is concluding 16 to 20 verse of these five verses. And one may ask that how Krishna karma or akarma, although it is also like any other work. You see that devotees who are engaged in the spreading of Krishna consciousness, they also eat. So they also go to the market and buy the vegetable. They also get their vehicles fueled at the petrol stations. So they are doing exactly the same work as all others are doing. So now, how one kind of action is having bondage and the other kind is called karma. So it is determined by the purpose. Who is the benefactor of that? Now, finally, we are all doing all this work for the result. So Krishna is telling one who gives up this result. In other words, if one is working for Krishna's work, that is called akarma, and that will produce exactly the opposite result of bondage, which is liberation. Just like the same electrical energy can produce both heating effect and cooling effect. So similarly, and Prabhupada also gives an example, just like under the laws of the state, when somebody kills somebody, harms anybody, he is punished. So he's, as a murderer, he is imprisoned. He is being given a punishment. But the same murder, if it is performed on the border by a military officer, then the same person is rewarded by the state or the constitution. That is because they empower that activity for the protection of the state. So similarly, the same activity when performed for Krishna's pleasure, that will not yield any reactions. And then in the verses 21 before, you will see that how one has to give up the sense of proprietorship over his possessions and acts only for the bare necessity. This is also another symptom that Krishna is also another 4 5 symptoms he is stating in the verses 21 to 24. So and then so one may ask now, what is the meaning of giving up sense of proprietorship? So suppose now I am the owner of certain property, certain land. What is the meaning of giving up the sense of proprietorship? It means that one not trying to use that for one's own enjoyment, but using that for the pleasure of Krishna is one aspect of it. Another aspect is now the Shastras are not prohibiting or forbidding the living entities to maintain themselves. See, we have to eat. For eating food, you have to earn. So, to maintain the body and soul together. So, that's why Krishna is telling one who acts only for the bare necessities of life. So, then he is considered to be in transcendental knowledge. And the another symptom Krishna is telling in the next verse, that is in the 22nd verse, one who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord. That means no hard labor. No hard labor means no, no. Sometimes people go mad, passionate about achieving some certain things without understanding that the life is very short. So we can work, we can expect result, we can hope for certain outcome, but then we should be satisfied if it doesn't come in our way. And this leads to the next principle Krishna is explaining, how one has to be free from duality. Free from duality means no hankering and no lamentation. No hankering for something which I don't have, and no lamentation for something that I could not maintain, something that went away from me. So this is true with possessions, this is true with relationship, this is true with all other things. So one should be free from duality means one should not be hankering for something. I don't have this, he has that. And or lamentation, I don't have this I had this but I don't have anymore. So both these things are called dualities. And one who does not envy. So this is how Krishna also told earlier in this chapter, that why Krishna is choosing Arjuna, because he doesn't envy. He's a friend, he's a devotee. And one more symptom Krishna is telling here is steady both in success and failure. So this is what he meant by being freed from the results of work. One is entitled to perform the work, but one is not entitled to the fruits of action, whether it can be success or it can be failure. So that's how in Krishna had mentioned in the chapter 3, that if you want to become free from bondage, you should do all the work as sacrifice. So one should, it brings us to a question that first of all, is there any connection between sacrifice to Vishnu and performing devotional work that Krishna is talking about here? So to understand this, we should go to the next section, which is section 4 from verses 25 to 33. So in these 6 plus 3, 9 verses, Krishna is explaining different types of sacrifices performed by human beings. So here he begins this section by saying some worship the demigods by offering sacrifices to please them, just like in this chapter itself we discussed, for getting some quick results which are material and temporary. Whereas some worship the supreme Brahman. So generally sometimes people misunderstand Brahman and Brahma. Brahma is the living entity who is the creator on the basis of receiving directions from Vishnu. Whereas supreme Brahman is referring to the supreme absolute truth, who is Lord Vishnu himself. So Krishna is telling some offered sacrifice to devatas, other devatas, and some offer to the supreme Brahman. And whereas some offer sacrifice the hearing process. Now, what is the meaning of this sacrificing the hearing process? Here, this is referring to brahmacharis. So, brahmacharis are supposed to not hear anything other than the glories of the Lord. Harer namanu kirtanam. It is said that except this, they don't hear anything else. So this is the meaning of sacrificing the hearing process. So they only strictly hear only Harikatha. And then some sacrifice the objects of the senses. So this is referring to the grihasthas. So sacrificing the objects of senses means, as a grihastha, a practitioner, a devotional practitioner, a sadhaka receives a license for engaging in certain activities. Like, for example, he has to engage with the wife for the sake of progeny, but that does not mean unrestricted intelligence. He has to maintain himself, he has to earn money to maintain wife and children. So, but that does not mean he goes about unlimitedly without regard to the scriptures. So for grihastha, he has to interact with the objects of senses, but again for bare minimum maintenance of body and soul together. So therefore, for sometimes grihasthas offer the sacrifice with the objects of the senses, and some people in the next verses it is referring to controlling the 10 kinds of life air. So it is referring to the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. So, or sometimes people sacrifice material possessions in the 28th verse that you see. That how you see people opening charitable hospitals, senior citizen homes, anath ashramas. So you see lot of varieties of charitable activities being performed. So all these are called as Dravamaya Yagna. So where Dravya Mana Yagna. So where they are sacrificing the Dravya, the material possessions, for the sake of benefit. Or sometimes you will see Tapomaya Yagna. Tapomaya Yagna means undergoing certain strict vows and practice severe austerities, just like Chaturmasya. So right now we are all going through the second month of Chaturmasya. As per the strict principles of Chaturmasya, one does not move from one place for those 4 months, and during those 4 months he doesn't even shave. So and then he eats only once a day, and he also abstains from certain kind of food stuff. Like for the first month of Chaturmasya, they abstain from shak, the green leaf vegetables. On the second month, they abstain from yogurt, curds. In the third month, they abstain from milk or milk products. and the fourth month they abstain from urad dal, so which is very high in protein. So like this, the Shastras recommend different principles. So some people perform tapomaya yagna, or some people perform ashtanga yoga. So it is also called a yoga yagna. So where eight different kinds of thing they practice. Or some people study the Vedas. So studying the Vedas is called Swadhyaya Yagna. And in the next verse, Krishna is talking about pranayama. So that is, managing the 10 kinds of air within the body, and the inhalation, exhalation cycles, and all that. And even curtailing the eating process is also a kind of an yagna. So Krishna is mentioning this in the 29th verse. So, and that is how, for practical sadhaka, curtailing eating process is very important. So that is why Prabhupada applied this principle of Yukta Vairagya, and he has given us prasadam. So when we offer food to Krishna, what is the mood? See, it is not a mere ritual that okay, we are keeping a plate of food in front of Krishna, and therefore it is, the whole mood is that I am not having this for my enjoyment. All this has come from you, because we had discussed in the previous chapter that how yajna, so the performance of sacrifice brings rain, and the rain brings food. So this food is nothing but your mercy. So I am offering it back to you, just like the Dasaru says, "Kereya neeranu kerege challi." So this kind of a mood when you apply, deploy, and have food, so then that is the practical form of curtailing the eating process. So it's a thing in action. So, and when we do all these types of yagnas, what will happen? So Krishna explains in the 30th verse that one will get cleansed of sinful reaction, and he will make gradual progress. And then in the further verses, he also says, on the other hand, one who does not do any sacrifice, he can never live happily on this planet, either in this life or in the other life. Then one may ask that why there so many types of sacrifices are recommended. Can it not be one type of sacrifice which is the best for everybody? So just like there is a saying, one size doesn't fit all. So similarly, Krishna is giving an explanation in the 34th verse that why there are different types of yagnas mentioned here, and different types of sacrifices. That is because we all have different natures. We all have different inclinations to work. So based on our inclination to work, based on our guna, based on our nature, so based on our mode of nature, so Krishna has devised all these different types of sacrifices. But what is the commonality in all these things? So one has to acquire transcendental knowledge. So, and that is possible by sacrificing, by performing a sacrifice of any of these type. So, and then in the next verse, that is from 34th verse, the section 5 will begin from the verses 34 to 42. So these 8 verses, we can name it as transcendental knowledge. So first of all, Krishna is telling, so we earlier had asked this question, that is Krishna discouraging asking any questions. So, and we had I had mentioned that we will discuss this in the 34th verse. So in this verse, Krishna is telling what is the qualification of a disciple to receive the transcendental knowledge. Is it that anybody can walk in and demand that I understand whole of this Gita? No. So there are certain qualifications. What are that certain qualifications? Krishna is telling, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. So one has to do three things. One is pranipata. Pranipata means approaching or surrendering. And pariprashna means submissive inquiries. And sevaya means rendering of service. So in other words, both blind following and absurd inquiries, both extremes are condemned by Krishna. He's telling, yes, you should approach a spiritual master and you need not blindly follow him. You can ask queries, pariprashna, but that queries should be submissive with an intent of understanding, not with with an intent of challenging, putting down somebody or proving him wrong. And then you should also render practical service. It is not that okay, I just come and ask a few intellectual questions and try to, so just by asking question one cannot understand. So Krishna is now bringing in the practical aspect of understanding transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge, understanding it is not limiting to understanding the literary meaning of Gita. Now what we are trying to understand is the meaning. So but the real understanding will come only when we do all these three things together: approaching the bona fide spiritual master, and asking submissive inquiries, and also rendering of practical service. And then in the verse 35, Krishna is summarizing that the transcendental knowledge in one sentence. He says, what is the meaning of transcendental knowledge? He says, three aspects. If you understand these three aspects, that means you have understood transcendental knowledge. What are the three aspects? All beings are part and parcel of Krishna. Second, all beings are situated in Krishna. And third, all beings are belonging to Krishna. So if one understands that these three aspects, then he can be termed as understood the transcendental knowledge. Now, how can a person understand these three aspects? It is only possible by the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. That is how Krishna gives the previous verse as a prelude to understanding transcendental knowledge, that one has to approach a bona fide spiritual master, and only when we approaches bona fide spiritual master, he will get this knowledge. And then in the next three verses, that is 36 and to 38, so Krishna is saying that this material world is an ocean of ignorance, nescience. But a person who can understand this knowledge by approaching a spiritual master, he can eliminate this ignorance. Just like Krishna is giving an example, just like a blazing fire can turn firewood into ashes, similarly the fire of transcendental knowledge can burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. So, and Prabhupada also gives example, just like when one is hungry, he goes on eating food, and as he is consuming food, his hunger will be satiated. So he will not feel that pangs of hunger as he goes on eating the food. Similarly, one who acquires this transcendental knowledge by the approaching the spiritual master, by serving and all that, he will understand that there is nothing more to be achieved. And such a person, he can easily subdue his senses and attain the spiritual peace. So, in other words, if somebody is continuing to be ignorant without transcendental knowledge, in the 38th verse, Krishna is saying that he can neither find happiness in this life nor in the next life. So that is the importance of approaching a spiritual master and understanding the three aspects of the transcendental knowledge. And then further in the 39 and 40th, it is the same conclusion, that for the doubting soul there is no happiness neither in this world or in the next. So and in the last two verses, Krishna is concluding that one who renounces the fruits of action, renouncing the fruits of action, like we understood from the previous chapter, it means to act for Krishna's pleasure and not for one's own pleasure. Then he will not be bound by the reactions of the work. And if you remember in the second chapter, Arjuna had asked Krishna, tell me clearly, sorry, the third chapter, first verse, Arjuna had asked, tell me decisively. So what is your decision? Should I act? Should I work? Or should I retire? So you are confusing me. So third chapter, Krishna, after explaining everything, he had continued, and now in this chapter he explains transcendental knowledge. And now in the last two verses, he is decisively giving his decision, and he is telling Arjuna to stand up and fight. So here it is also saying that when Krishna is telling Arjuna to stand up and fight, it is not that Arjuna is physically sitting and is asking Arjuna to physically stand up and fight. In other words, when Krishna is telling, so stand Uttishto Bharata, Krishna is indicating that you elevate your knowledge to this transcendental knowledge that I have just now explained, that how one has to work for Krishna's pleasure, and by working for Krishna's pleasure, you will not be bound by any work, karma or vikarma, bad karma or good karma. And by this, you will, you will have achieved the transcendental knowledge, and you will be firm in the self, and you will not have any more dualities. So this is how Krishna concludes the fourth chapter of the transcendental knowledge. So if I think only now it's already 6:50, and today we have a Balaram Jayanti celebration, so a small celebration at our center here. So thank all of you for joining the session, and we will connect again next week. And if you have time for the next 10 minutes, I request you to chant 108 times of Hare Krishna mantra, and we will see you all in the next week. Hare Krishna.